I think for almost 8 years. I had a look at my records last night, and my first contact was in the early part of 2018. I thought I feel much older. No. Anyways, it's been really great, and it's really great to see the faces around the table. Yeah, Lauren.
For the record, Mary and I have been working on this since December 2014.
Yes.
You're a little late to our party.
Yeah, thank you, because I know Chris reminded me that this has been going on much, much longer than this last iteration. So it really speaks to the determination and tenacity of this community. And it's just been such an interesting project to be a part of, and I'm very grateful for that. We also have a fair number of people joining us virtually, and we'll do our best to make sure that we can see your hands up and make sure that you're fully included in the meeting today. If I could just say first off that the Comox Valley Regional District acknowledge that the Comox Valley sewage system is operated on the traditional unceded territory of the Comox First Nation. And we have a good agenda today that I'm hoping that we will get through. And we'll start first with the meeting minutes from the February 19th, 2026 meeting. And I'm immediately, of course, going to turn to Kevin and see if he has anything that he would any changes. Oh, you weren't there. Anybody have any questions or concerns about the minutes as presented? Thank you. Moved by Mary Lang, seconder. Thank you. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. So we have with us virtually today, Peter Howland, who's going to provide an overview of the environmental impact study. I'm just looking for Peter
Hello.
on the screen. There you are, Peter. Thank you.
Hello.
Welcome.
Yeah. And I'll first say I first was involved with this project back in 2008. So I don't know how how
The rest of us are just pikers, right?
yeah. Okay, well, yeah, my name's Peter. I'm with a company called Great Pacific Consulting. We're out of Victoria. I'm an aquatic scientist here and one of the lead professionals with the environmental impact study. I'll just try to share my screen here and let me know if everyone can see it.
Yes, we can
There
see
we
it
go.
now. Thank you.
Brilliant. Okay. Yeah, so there's a lot of information here, so I'll try to be as quick as possible here. But yeah, we'll just get started here. So just for context, sorry, my notes are hidden here. The environmental impact study is just a requirement of the municipal wastewater regulation. So this version of the EIS was started in 2024. It included first a stage one that was a desktop study. And from there, we moved to the stage two based on the recommendations and the findings of that study and completed some site-specific field work, and then finished up the stage two that included all of the information here in 2026. So in general, the EIS is intended to demonstrate that your discharge does not adversely affect the public health or the receiving environment. It's supposed to establish municipal effluent quality requirements if there's anything above and beyond what the provincial or federal regulations require. And it establishes a receiving environment monitoring program for going forward. And so what we did is we first looked at what is being discharged. So what are the effluent characteristics, volumes, any potential parameters of concern. We looked at the effluent, where it's being discharged, so relative to any oceanographic conditions, and any sensitive areas or receptors of concern. And then finally, we looked at how the effluent mixes and disperses in the receiving environment and looked at any impacts and how, if there's any parameters that may exceed the water quality guidelines in the receiving environment. Yeah, and we looked at effluent flows all the way up to the predicted 2020 or 2060 flow rates. And this environmental impact study, we assumed that the effluent is being discharged from the existing outfall, which or an equivalent, I guess, if there was any changes to that in the future, but basically from that same location. Right now, you have an outfall that extends 2.3 kilometers offshore of the low water mark off Cape Lazo. You can just maybe see it, the black and white dotted line in there. And then at the end of that outfall, there's a 175-meter long diffuser. And so that diffuses the effluent through multiple ports at a depth of 60 meters. Um, we the study area, the general study area for this is we selected an area of about 6 kilometers around the discharge. So that area is supposed to encompass any nearby sensitive areas, and then but not extend too far that the effluent's so dilute that you wouldn't be able to differentiate anything that from the receiving environment. So one of the first steps, or one of the steps in the EIS, is we did a detailed effluent characterization. So one of the requirements of the MWR is that your discharge is not allowed to exceed water quality guidelines at the edge of what's called an initial dilution zone. So that's a 100-meter radius around your point of discharge. And so you have to meet all water quality guidelines at the edge of that 100-meter radius. So the first thing is, or one of the things we did is we did a detailed analysis of the effluent. So we measured a lot of the standard parameters, bacteria, your enterococci, fecal coliform, ammonia, metals. But we also measured a suite of we grabbed two samples for a suite of sort of these additional parameters, nonylphenols, your PBDEs, PCBs, pHs, volatile organic carbons, pesticides. So we did a few detailed analysis of all of those and compared those to water quality guidelines. So the good thing is, in general, most of those parameters are all below available or applicable water quality guidelines in your present day effluent. The ones that we identified as what we call a parameter of potential concern were the bacteria, fecal coliform, enterococcus, your total suspended solids. Temperature is actually falls in that list, total ammonia, a couple metals, copper, zinc. And we did have some PCBs in the effluent that were close to or at guidelines, though the analysis and the guidelines, the detection limits are very close. So um, it's maybe a bit of a more of a long-term study or look at that might be required. And then we also found some of these flame retardants, the PBDEs, in the effluent. And I'll just make a quick note as well. We did some work looking at viruses in the effluent. There was a desire from the Ministry of Environment at the start of the process to look at viruses. And our understanding is that's a result of there's been shellfish contamination events in Bain Sound where it's linked to viruses. And So we did some work on that, but again, it's maybe a bit of a longer term study, as there's no present day literature or guidance or guidelines on what are safe levels of viruses in the receiving environment. So there's plenty of viruses present in your effluent. We just can't say what's a reasonable level in the receiving environment. So that generally would fall to other agencies like the BC CDC or Environment Canada, some of those other agencies that look into that. So um, the the site that we're looking at, like I mentioned, there's a 100-meter initial dilution zone around your point of discharge. So when you look at it at this scale, it's quite a small little area, and within that 100-meter radius of your discharge, you are allowed to exceed water quality guidelines according to MWR, as long as there's enough dilution that at the edge of that zone that you meet your all your water quality guidelines. So that's quite a small little yellow area in there. We also have a 300-meter offset that's required under the MWR. So the point of discharge, also the edge of the IDZ has to be 300 meters away from any sensitive areas, such as shellfish harvesting or recreational areas, something like that, or a sensitive habitat. Um, so that's a total of 400 meters. So overall, the general area of most concern is within that 400 meters, and anything that's kind of on the boundary of that area. If we look at, sorry, skipped ahead here. So going back, yeah, that back in 2008, there we deployed a current meter off Cape Lazo and did some other oceanographic work. And one of the main findings is that your currents generally just flow to the south. It's almost all of the time it's heading in a southerly direction, or southeast, and it kind of follows the natural depth contours of the water. So we expect that the majority of our effluent, after being discharged, heads down to the south. And if you kind of see the next slide here, that's generally kind of away more into open waters, away from the shoreline and that kind of stuff, which is a decent placement for the outfall. Um, we did a bit of an inventory of potential receptors of concern. So within that 6 kilometer zone, but outside of your 400-meter offset, there's parks such as, Kai Bay, Point Holmes, where obviously those are potential concern if people are in the water, swimming, kayaking, paddleboarding, and we wouldn't want those people interacting with the effluent plume. The area within the study area is also what's a ecologically and biologically significant area. So that's the federal government has identified specific areas where there's special biological or ecological significance. So it is quite a productive habitat area around there. So that has been identified as such. It's an important bird area. There's lots of eelgrass and kelp beds in the intertidal and shallow waters. That's what this particular plot here is showing is eelgrass and kelp beds in the area. So again, we're outside of those, which is a good thing. And those are, productive areas for fish. There's lots of commercial fishing that goes on in the area, crab, gooey duck, shrimp, prawn, and it's one of the most productive herring spawning areas around in the shallows. and through all those eelgrass and kelp beds, is one of the main reasons for that. I'm just going to bring up uh, shellfish, and in terms of this document, we generally look at shellfish as bivalve shellfish, so clams, oysters, geoducks, and they're particular of concern because they're filter feeders, and they'll suck in a lot of water. They're stuck in place, and so if anyone harvests those shellfish, there's a potential that there's bioaccumulation of any of the parameters, and then particularly most of the time we're worried about the bacteria, your fecal coliforms, and viruses. So if anyone harvests that shellfish and then consumes it, there's a chance of getting sick from the bacteria and viruses accumulated in the shellfish. So I think my next one here. Um, so it is a very productive shellfish area, and what we're showing here is the kind of purple hatched area is potential subtidal shellfish harvesting areas. So a lot of times we'll get, or in the area, we do get a lot of geoduck fishing, and that generally takes place down to a depth of 20 meters. And so that does butt up right against your 400-meter offset from the point of discharge. So um, there is there is some harvesting known to occur out to that area. There's also a known scallop fishing area south of the discharge as well. So those are probably the areas of sort of most concern with in relation to the discharge because they come right up to our 400-meter offset. Now, as part of the work, we did a site specific, and I'll call it baseline, but we did a receive and environment monitoring program that was conducted over a period of a year, and we collected a series of water quality samples. We did sediment quality sampling, which is you see on the right here. We're dropping a little grab sampler down and pulling up sediment, and as well as some benthic community samples to see what is living in the sediments on the bottom. Um, and this work also ties into, if we're seeing any impacts right now, how that impacts the future system and effluent quality and that sort. But the general results or some of the key results from that work is your bacteria and ammonia are definitely higher in the effluent presently. So we measure both the effluent and receiving environment. You can see on the right here, this kind of displays the water quality sampling station. So we sampled in and around the point of discharge, around the 400-meter offset, and some reference locations. So for ammonia, in the receiving environment and all the samples we collected, everything was within guidelines. There was no signature of elevated ammonia in the receiving environment. With the bacteria, um, we measured both during the summer and the winter seasons. In the summer, we did measure some elevated bacteria that would be above shellfish guidelines, but only, like I mentioned, downstream where most of the effluent's flowing. Um, Actually, here, I'll see if I can add my laser pointer. At these stations here that are downstream of it and at depth. So well down below where the shellfish are being harvested, and downstream sort of not in line with where we'd expect. So, but there is some signature of that in the receiving environment. Um, we also did measure some metals. Like we said, we measured some metals in the receiving environment, such as copper and zinc, or sorry, in the effluent, such as copper and zinc, and we did get some hits in the receiving environment, which was interesting, but we can't necessarily link those to the discharge, as some of those hits were also at our faraway reference station. And like mentioned before, there was PBDs in the effluent that exceeded the guidelines, particularly PBD 100 and total penta BDs. Okay, so for our sediment sampling, it's just kind of a picture here of some of the sediment that we're collecting and the resulting benthic screen here. Um, the sorry. Um, Generally, we didn't see any major signatures of any deposition or accumulation of pollutants in the sediment. Sorry. Generally, we measured like total organic carbon, which would be a signature of excess organics that may be depositing within the area. So there wasn't any signature of that. Metals were within the guidelines, so we're not seeing those metals accumulating. Um, we did measure one, one PAH, so most were within guidelines, but there was this 2-methylnaphthalene that exceeded at an IDZ station, so within 100 meters there. Um, we did measure PBDs also within the sediment, so those were all well within guidelines, but there was some signature of those being elevated closer to the point of discharge, but still within guidelines. And we did have some PCBs measured in the sediment, but again, they're very, very close to detection limits and guidelines, so it's difficult to draw too many conclusions from that. But there was some signature of potential PCBs in the sediment. Um, this is just a quick overview of some of the benthic invertebrate sampling that we did. Um, the plot here on the right kind of gives an indication of the total number of individual invertebrates and that we measured within the stations. Um, for this, it's difficult to make too many conclusions. We do see this station right in the middle with the most abundance, so the most number of invertebrates was right at the outfall terminus. So um, we're not seeing a reduction of our benthic invertebrates at that station. But this is something that would require, several years to see if there's any impacts from this here. But this first little indication would suggest that things are relatively consistent and actually maybe you have a higher abundance um, at the point of discharge. Um, so now so we have our influent properties. We have what are receptors of concern. We have some baseline data as well. So the next step in the environmental impact study We did some dilution modeling and an impact assessment. So what the modeling does is just look at what the mixing is within that 100 and 400 meter offsets. And we did the modeling for a range of conditions. Basically, we're looking at our ambient temperature and salinity profiles, and those kind of impact, along with the currents, impact how well that plume mixes, how far up in the water column it rises. Um, so these are our results for a 14-day simulation of the discharge under varying ambient conditions. So the first plot up here is just showing us where uh, how deep the effluent plume is expected to be. So as the tides change throughout the day, we're expecting that plume to remain trapped below the surface. So we don't expect any of the effluent to make it all the way up to the surface. And in fact, it's likely to stay below 20 meters most of the time. And depending on our ambient conditions, that might this green line here represents a more stratified receiving environment, so that effluent plume is all staying quite deep down at 55 to 45 meters. And then, if you have less stratification in the receiving environment, there's a potential that fresh water can float closer to the surface, and then you get these shallower plumes. But overall, that plume is expected to stay trapped at depth. The next plot here is just how much dilution we expect within that 100-meter area, and we get good dilution on average. Um, Sorry, we're saying the minimum median dilution, but so looking down here, sort of at our green plot here, the median was 192 in there. So we're getting for every part of receiving environment water, there's one part of for 192 parts of receiving environment, we get one part of effluent. So it dilutes pretty quickly. Our minimum is down to 114, and if we go back to the municipal wastewater regulation, their requirement is that we get a minimum of 10. So we're 10 times higher than the absolute minimum requirements, and 20 times higher than sort of on worst case and on average. Okay, so this table here, it may be hard to read. The words are probably quite small for depending on what you're looking at. But basically, what this goes through is the most of those parameters of potential concern that we looked at or that we identified at the start, relative to water quality guidelines. So, um, and what we've shown here is a factor of safety. So things like temperature, total suspended solids, zinc, they're all expected to be, 52 in terms of zinc, it's going to be 52 times lower than the water quality guideline. Temperature is 16 times lower. So these are all quite in our assertion is these are all quite low risk uh, parameters. So we don't expect there's any chance that you're going to exceed a temperature water quality guideline or total suspended solids guideline. And so that's the same for all the zinc, pHs, PVDs, PCBs. So these are going to be well below water quality guidelines based on that dilution modeling. The ones that are a bit more of concern are these ones here are fecal coliforms, ammonia, and copper. They're all still expected to meet water quality guidelines. We just have a reduced factor of safety. So ammonia, we're 3 times below, and copper 2 times. So we're still fine, but we're just not quite as much factor of safety on those ones. And with the microbiological indicators, the fecal coliforms, we've actually gone and back calculated what's the maximum concentration that you should have in your effluent in order to maintain that factor of safety. So we're recommending this 1300 CFU per 100 milliliters as a effluent limit for your fecal coliforms in order to maintain water quality guidelines. Okay. And then so the last thing here is that going forward, we've recommended a ongoing receive and environment monitoring program. And then so this is a requirement of the MWR that you have a ongoing monitoring program. And they have a guidance document that outlines their recommendations for it. So we've put together a monitoring program that's based around their recommendations. So that's going to include some quarterly effluent monitoring, and then some biannual water quality sampling. So similar to what we did, we went out in the summer and winter and collected a series of water quality samples. And then we're recommending that every 3 years you do the sediment and benthic community assessment. So going forward, those are be your ongoing monitoring program. And generally these programs, there's an expectation that's completed for at least kind of 2 cycles. So the water quality sampling we would do at least 2 years before kind of re-looking at it, seeing what the results are, and then there's maybe an opportunity to optimize it for what we're seeing. And then so yeah, maybe the sediment and benthic community assessment happens for twice for 6 years or something like that, and then is re-looked at. And yeah, just going to conclusions. I'll just kind of quickly go through what I had, and then I can try to answer your questions. So yeah, so our plume, we expect good dilution. We expect it to be trapped down below 18 meters here. We expect that all water quality guidelines are going to be achieved at the edge of your IDZ at 100 meters. We are recommending that the effluent is disinfected, and that the criteria for that is 1,300 CFUs. And that's to achieve your shellfish water quality guidelines. I didn't talk about it previously, but the MWR has reliability categories, and so given the proximity to the shellfish, this puts you into a category 1. And then yeah, and then we're recommending the receiving environment monitoring program. So yeah, any questions? Hopefully there was a lot there, but yeah, happy to answer questions.
Thanks so much, Peter. Just before we go to questions, if I could just ask Gary, there's no expectation of a request for decision about this. This is going to form a part of the liquid waste management plan that'll go to the province. Is that correct? Right. Great. So questions? Yes.
I have a question that's for Gary. I'm trying to recall where UV disinfection fell in the liquid waste management plan. Is it in the initial phase, or we had talked about UV disinfection at the wastewater plant?
Unfortunately, Chris had to step away and he's probably better to answer that question, but I believe it is in the initial phase,
Okay,
but I can
thanks, Derek.
double check that, Jim. Yeah, thanks.
Yes, Kevin.
Just a question. Was there any shellfish tissue analyzed in this study? I didn't see anything. And looking at bioaccumulation of metals and other things?
No, we did not specifically test any tissue samples in this program. And part of that decision is looking at we're not seeing any impacts in the sediment at the moment. So if we were seeing sediment that it contained higher levels of metals, then there's probably more of a push to go ahead and do that. But yeah,
Okay.
there has not been at this time.
And part two of that, just again, I'm trying to pay attention. You list, I think, copper and zinc as a potential concern. Can you go back and I may have got this wrong. When you talked about baseline stations that were outside of the effluent, sorry, the discharge area, you said there was they were present there. So I guess my question is, did you find baseline different from around the effluent for those two parameters?
Um, yeah, I can get you the here. Maybe I'll.
Well, and sorry, I'm being convoluted. It just you recommended that there was some risk. I thought I heard that you also found those metals in baseline stations. So I'm unclear on why would you have risk if you found those metals in baseline stations that were away. That's all. Does that
Yeah,
make sense?
so basically what we've identified and I'll kind of put it in terms of risk as is a bit of quotation, but what we've concluded is that the copper and zinc exceed guidelines in the effluent. So without any dilution, without any mixing, those two parameters would exceed a water quality guideline. And so with the mixing at the edge of the 100-meter initial dilution zone, we're expecting those concentrations to be down below water quality guidelines. And we have for zinc, we're predicting a factor of safety of 52, and with copper, it's a lower factor of safety, but it's at 2.9. What we did measure in the receiving environment in our baseline studies in the sediment, everything was within water quality guidelines, so we don't have any expectation right now that copper or zinc are accumulating in the sediments and causing sediment quality or issues with the benthic environment. What we did measure in the receiving environment was some individual samples that were elevated and above water quality guidelines. And however, some of those were at the surface or at the reference station. I think so copper, we did measure some copper in the receiving environment, but it was out at the reference station. So at the moment, we don't have any reason to believe that that's a result of the discharge. We're not sure where that elevated concentration came from, but it did show up in the monitoring. Yeah, so yeah, we basically we don't expect any elevated concentrations as a result of the discharge, but there was some measured values or some measured concentrations in the receiving environment, but for the vast majority of the samples, everything was well below water quality guidelines.
You're good, Kevin, for the moment?
Sure. So is there any intent then to look at tissue sampling and bioaccumulation in the future, or is it just based on the results now? You're saying that there's not an issue?
We have not identified that at the moment. And it is something that that could be looked at, but it has not been identified at the moment.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate that.
Great. Thanks, Kevin. We have several people online, and so what I'm going to do is alternate back and forth between those online and those who are waiting present. So we'll start with Caitlin.
Thank you, everyone. Yeah, thanks for sharing, Peter. I really appreciate it. I was just wondering, what water quality guidelines were you using? Were you using like marine aquatic life or primary contact recreation? I'm just trying to understand like how you assessed which guidelines you were using. Were you using like the most conservative one for any given parameter or?
Yeah, so I was just trying to see. I think I had, but yeah, primarily it was marine aquatic life guidelines. So the vast majority of those were compared to marine aquatic life guidelines. All the effluent as well, we compared those to marine aquatic life guidelines. So um, and then there are some guidelines that are like the shellfish harvesting, recreational guidelines. Those were all included in the program as well.
Okay, great. Is it okay if I ask a follow-up question or like, is that all right?
Sorry, Caitlin, we're just having a hard time hearing you.
No, I was just wondering if I could ask a follow-up question.
She wants to ask a follow-up question.
Oh, yes, go ahead.
Yeah, so I was just wondering about the if there's the desire to include any other parameters in the assessment. I'm thinking about some like up and coming emergent contaminants like 6-PPDQ or some other ones like that. And then I think because of the importance of this area to shellfish, I think just really reflecting on that decision to do some tissue sampling, I think would be really important for future monitoring efforts.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, this was the list of the parameters of potential concern was based primarily off of um, the available marine water quality guidelines. So we didn't extend on into parameters that presently don't have guidelines. And just because that list grows and grows and grows uh, pretty quick, so we kept it down to all those parameters that have guidelines, and there's something qualitative or quantitative that we can assess it against.
Totally. Thank you so much, Peter.
No worries.
Thanks, Caitlin. And I think, Ian, you were first.
And I'm trying to remember the exact words that I saw, but there was the category 1 reliability, I think was the words that were used. I would just like to understand a little bit more about what are these categories, so that we can kind of put that into perspective when we're looking at the rest of this presentation.
Oh, sure. So I might just quickly, I'm going to pull up the municipal wastewater regulation really quickly, but basically the categories relate to um, the redundancy within the system and how long essentially maybe something would within a component within your wastewater treatment system could be down without rep for repair. So here, I'm just pulling it up here, and then maybe I can quickly just give you the Coles notes. But generally, the category 1 under the MWR, they categorize that as a facility of which short-term effluent degradation could cause permanent or unacceptable damage in the receiving environment, including discharges near drinking water, shellfish waters, or recreational waters. And then a category 2 if um, is with respect to permanent or unacceptable damage in the receiving environment would not be caused by short-term effluent degradation, but would be caused by long-term effluent degradation. And then a category 3 is outside of those two areas. And so Within the MWR, they have they just specify the number of aeration basins and disinfection basins and relative sizes and that kind of stuff. There's a whole list that the design would be based on.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks. Nico, and then Mary, you're wanting, okay. Yeah, Nico first.
Thanks. Thanks for the presentation. I'm just interested in the statistics or the data on the trapping. So
Yep.
the effluent plume, sort of, you said would be trapped below the 20-meter depth range. I guess my question is, how far did you measure this? How far is this predicted? Is this only within the 6-kilometer radius or further afield?
So the predictions are the predictions would hold for, I would say, the 400-meter radius. Our model, the model that we employed is the model's called Visual Plumes. It's a fairly constrained model, I guess. It doesn't measure boundaries and that kind of stuff. It sort of assumes a infinite environment. So we're just looking at that small little 400-meter radius circle is where these predictions are applicable. However, in general, I would say that your vertical mixing of the water column is pretty slow. So once your plume kind of reaches that trapping depth, it's going to settle out in a layer, and then from there, for the most part, it's going to spread horizontally with mixing, and then the vertical mixing in the ocean is a much slower process. So once we're out of that 400-meter zone and the effluent plume travels away with the currents, we expect it to stay within that range and dilute horizontally much quicker than vertically. And that's a function of your density profile. So in the Strait of Georgia, a lot of times you'll have especially this time of year, you have a lot of fresh water coming in from the Fraser River, and that kind of puts this fresh water or density gradient down in the water column. So that kind of hinders vertical movement of the water. If that answers your question.
Yeah, it does. I guess the short answer, we don't really know where the plume ends up is the conclusion.
Yeah, in the long term, in the long range, we have not looked at that. But we're expecting everything to meet water quality guidelines within that 100-meter radius, and then even better at 400 meters, and so outside of that, things just should get better as the plume dilutes.
Okay. Yep. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Nico. Mary.
Thank you. Well, I understand we need to monitor the PCB levels. I'm wondering, this question is more for the CVRD, is there some plan to determine source? Is there a way of determining source of PCB ending up in the outfall?
Peter, do you want to answer that while Jerry's thinking?
Oh, sorry, was that for me?
No, it was for Derry.
Oh,
It
sorry.
was more for Derry, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't think it's Peter's bailiwick.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry, again, this is probably a better question for Chris, and he may be back by the end of the meeting to be able to answer it more concretely. So maybe we can park that one for now if it's okay, Mary. Yeah, thank you.
Any other questions, Martin? You had your...
Fascinating. I actually live right in the middle of one of those photographs, and I'm a keen observer of what's happening on the surface of the ocean, and often wondering what is happening beneath it. And this is super informative, and thank you for it. I'm envisaging the tide coming in and coming out. There's a 6-meter variation between extreme high and extreme low tide. So we got 6 meters on top, flushing in and out twice a day, and 60 meters depth, where you have a volume every day of liquid going out there. I'm just kind of getting my arms around the scale of what's going on. And I did a little calculation, which was, I think I picked up somewhere a figure of 76,000 cubic meters per day is kind of the maximum amount of liquid that's coming out of the pipe. Is that roughly right?
Yeah, I have
number?
that number way back at the start.
Okay, now I'm grappling with what does that look like, and I thought, okay, that's going to look like this building, the volume of this building, kind of thing, every day. Something of that order, like it's a cube of 10 or a cube of 40-meter cube or something like that, flushing out into the ocean. Now, where am I going with this? I guess let me ask this question. Does your study say anything about the adequacy of treatment that's envisaged in the plan for the treatment plant? Does it say that we're doing too much treatment or too little treatment in order to meet the water quality guidelines? Did it say anything about the design of the plant that is good or bad?
Yeah, I
What does it
think
say?
that, yeah, so that goes back to our final um our final assessment of the parameters of concern. So the generally my understanding, and now I'm not a wastewater treatment engineer, but for the most part, when you're looking at the municipal wastewater regulation, when you're looking at like sort of the design of the treatment plant, generally you're looking at the suspended solids content of that treatment system. You're looking at the oxygen, um, the chemical oxygen demand, and sort of bacteria and then maybe ammonia and phosphorus. You're looking at some of those nutrients. So generally, when you're specifying the level of treatment, you'd be looking at those primary categories or primary parameters. So we have not recommended additional treatment beyond what is the minimum requirements, which is a total suspended solids concentration of 45 and same for BOD. So when we look at this summary, what we're saying is that everything that we've measured, that we've identified as a potential parameter of potential concern, we expect to meet water quality guidelines at the IDZ, and then therefore we're not recommending a higher level of treatment than what is being proposed. If some of these categories, if these water quality guidelines were not being achieved, then we would want to be looking at a higher level of treatment. So basically our conclusion is that yes, the proposed treatment is adequate. We expect to meet water quality guidelines at the edge of the day. We expect to meet these regulations. And the receiving environment monitoring program, the ongoing program, is intended to confirm that on an ongoing basis, to confirm that we are meeting water quality guidelines, and then that sediment and benthic community sampling. The intention there is those are more of a long-term indicator of concern. So if a pollutant like copper is falling out of that effluent plume, landing on the seabed and accumulating, then in theory we're going to see a signature of elevated copper or those parameters in the receiving environment, and over time, if we're seeing those increase or decrease, then maybe there's a decision for elevated treatment.
Okay, thank you very much. Interesting.
Thanks,
Yeah.
Martin.
I was just maybe just add one more thing. I don't think there's no opportunity as well for us to recommend a lower level of treatment.
I was going to go there. Yeah.
There's a minimum level of treatment. The secondary treatment system is a requirement on my understanding, and we're not recommending anything less lenient or more lenient than that. Sorry. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks for that, Peter. Tracy.
Yeah, thank you, Tracy Clark from the Chamber of Commerce. Hoping to tap into Nico a little bit with this question, just because the shellfish industry is such an important industry for the Comox Valley. It looks like 15 to 20 million of our local economy comes from that. So do you do any of your own monitoring, Nico? And if so, like, what's the process if you discover that it's not meeting the standards necessary? I have a few questions actually, so maybe I'll just get them all out at once. Are there any warning signs that we might be looking at? Say if you talked about dilution coming in from like rainfall and down the mountain. So are there any warning signs if there's less water and less snowpack coming in the future? Will that dilution be happening at the same rate that we're counting on now? And then also for the shellfish industry, does this affect any possible expansion, or are there any production expansions planning, and would this affect that in any way? So basically 3 questions.
I don't think I can answer on the snowpack issue, but I'll take a go at the other two. So in terms of monitoring, there is, I guess, general area classification monitoring happening for the growing region. So that's done by the CSSP partners. So it's Environment Canada, DFO, and CFIA. And generally, it is with regards to microbiological from a water quality perspective. So they do an initial assessment of risk, and based off of that, they do their regular seasonal monitoring at various points for microbial indicators. There is biotoxin, which is not related to pollution outfalls, but some, I guess, very limited heavy metal analysis that's being done. So just in general, one of the metals that is of concern to the shellfish industry, I guess, would be something like cadmium. So that might become a limiting factor for exports to Europe, for instance. So there are very specific human health standards within consumption of shellfish associated with cadmium. Typically, here in the Pacific region, in BC particularly, we have a region that generally is pretty high in cadmium. So it's in the growing environment just from a sediment, a natural sediment, and that may be what they've been seeing with the results of the heavy metals in the reference sites.
Looks like we've lost Nico.
Yeah.
Well, let's see if he signs back in. Peter, did you have anything to add to what Nico was saying?
The only thing I can add relative to the I guess future sort of will changes to snowpack or river discharges influence this? I don't see that. We haven't explicitly looked at future changes as a result of climate change, though essentially our worst case relative to a shellfish is if that effluent plume rises closer to the surface. So most of the, all of the harvesting, especially of geoducks or anything intertidal, is obviously near that the surface of the water. And then geoducks, my understanding, are harvested down to about 20 meters of depth. So right now we're saying our plume is we're expecting that to stay below that 20-meter line. And if for that plume to rise higher in the water column, for it to float, because it's a freshwater and a salt water environment, so it naturally floats towards the surface. The worst case for that is generally in the winter when we have little runoff. Well, like when the major rivers have less runoff and you have essentially a, a consistent water column profile. So it allows the effluent to kind of rise closer towards the surface before being trapped. And so that condition was modeled, and any kind of future reduction in fresh water, I guess, to the area would be consistent with that, and maybe you're more likely to see a shallower plume in the summer or the spring when you have your freshet, but um, you we've essentially modeled that condition. So my expectation is there shouldn't be a large variation from those trapping depths and dilutions if with climate change or any changes to the river and freshwater input.
Great, thank you.
Thanks, Peter. Does that answer all your questions, Tracy?
It does that, but I see that Nico's back, so maybe he has more to say.
Sorry about that. I'm not sure.
Oh, there he is back.
Yeah, I dropped off for some reason. I'm not sure it's my end, but so there's quite a bit of monitoring, and from a microbiological perspective, I think we're fairly satisfied with the water quality as it's been. It's a pretty good growing environment. I think my concern is more around the bioaccumulation of potential viral particles. So our recommendation would always be, as an industry, that there is disinfection as a primary or as a treatment with any effluent discharges, because the issue is that if those particles make their way into the shellfish and the shellfish gets tested by the regulators, that essentially results in closures if it's associated with illnesses. So if we've got confidence in our wastewater system that the majority of the effluent that is going into the receiving environment is being disinfected, then that's one less thing for us to be concerned about. So there might still be non-point sources, but it's few and far between, so it's less impactful than a consistent or constant supply. And then just quickly on the expansion, limitation of expansion, I don't really see that as a concern or issue. Bain Sound itself is fairly heavily occupied in terms of shellfish industry. I wouldn't say it's fully utilized, the existing footprint. So there's still room to move before we need to consider expansion. So not a concern there either.
Thanks, Nico. Any other questions? If not, we'll conclude that this is going forward with the LWMP, and monitoring will carry on. Thanks for that. Good discussion and great questions. We're going to move to Derry's going to give us an update on the South Sewer project.
Yeah, thank you, Michael. Okay, so this is just going to be a fairly quick update. Sorry. So as the committee is aware, initial planning for the Sewer Extension South project was undertaken as an addendum to the Stage 1 and 2 Liquid Waste Management Plan, which was submitted to the province in 2022. And that addendum was completed over 2 years and then also submitted to the province for review in the spring of 24. For those of you involved in that planning process, you may remember that at that time, further engineering and design for the project was planned to be completed as part of this Stage 3 LWMP. However, due to changes in the plan following submission of the addendum report, project development has been delayed and that work hasn't been able to progress. As many of you are aware, we have lost a significant funding partner for the project that has impacted overall project budget and requires changes to be made to the initial project plan in order to maintain affordability for Area A residents and those communities. And unfortunately, these changes require additional planning work that will extend beyond the scheduled completion of this Stage 3 planning process. So this means that project updates will need to be completed as part of a future amendment to the LWMP, which will of course include further opportunity for public and TACPAC input and review at that time. This is certainly not where we had hoped to be at this stage, but we are working hard with our project partners to identify and assess options for advancing the project, as well as progressing some outstanding engineering and archaeological due diligence. And as was clearly communicated in public feedback, affordability remains primary importance for the project, along with environmental protection. So given, oh sure, sorry. Yeah, and this is on the following slide as well, but failing septic systems were kind of a key driver for the project itself. And so this was discussed quite a bit during the addendum process, but if sewer servicing does not proceed as planned, there is a commitment to explore the development of a septic maintenance bylaw for the proposed service area. You can see that in the commitments. So yeah, so given the current project status, the Sewer Extension South commitments in the draft Stage 3 LWMP are as follows. So a commitment to continue to advance planning and design for the project, considering affordability as a key criterion for successful project delivery. A commitment to continue to seek additional grant funding and partnership contributions for the project, in addition to the $30 million in provincial funding that has already been secured. And then, as I just mentioned, a commitment to explore development of a septic maintenance bylaw for the proposed service area, which was a commitment carried over from the addendum, given that failing septic systems are a key project driver. And this was consulted on during the development of the addendum. And that's kind of all I have, but I welcome, comments, questions. Anything. Mary?
I'm not sure whether this is really facile or not, but if we were looking at installing the South Sewer project and that's been dropped because of the primary funder leaving, is there no way of pairing with the idea of a bylaw, a septic bylaw, a maintenance bylaw, to provide low or no interest loans to the homeowners down there? If their septic systems are the primary driver, is there no way of assigning that money that was considered to providing that as an option so that we may not need the South Sewer?
Yeah, I mean, potentially that could be an option that's looked at in the future. I think at this point we're we're looking to still advance the project. We're looking at kind of different options for project phasing, scope, etc., that could bring the project kind of within budget as was envisioned during the addendum planning process. But yes, certainly something to consider.
Other questions? Yeah.
I think
Jim.
Mary must have read my mind. I sort of thought about this a lot, and my big concern is if the option identified for South Sewer is to shorten the distance that it goes, say per se to Royston or whatever. I really wonder about the possibility of ever extending it beyond that, given the fact that government funding doesn't seem to be a lot out there these days. And I think it would be blatantly unfair to the residents of Union Bay if the pipe only went as far as Royston, when that funding model was based on extending it all the way to Union Bay. And I do hope that more than one option is looked at when we do try to come up with some solutions. Maybe the option is the only, there may be enough funding to build just the conveyance system as opposed to the collection system. So build the pipe out there, and if you build it, they will come, as they say. So I do hope that the blinders aren't on when we're looking at options of just shortening the pipe up, but all the options be explored, including Mary's option.
Thank you, Jim. Yeah, and thank you, Mary. Great feedback.
Nico?
Yeah, this ties into Mary's comment, I guess. So in terms of trying to see if the project is going to commence, what's the timeline on that? How long are we going to try and see if we can find funding to get the project going or not? When is that decision? And the reason I ask it is because then if it doesn't proceed, then we'll consider or explore bylaws to improve the septic situation. So
yeah, at this point, I don't have an answer to that, Nico. We don't really have a defined timeline where, beyond a certain date, we're going to kind of change to look at alternate options. But certainly we will keep the community and this committee updated as we kind of continue to review those options.
Okay, thank you.
Can I ask Jerry, if it was an addendum to, you're going to ship off the LWMP to the province for review which is a time-consuming process, the review, would it be possible while it's being reviewed to amend it, or would it have to wait till it gets approved? Or
yeah, I think those are options that we could explore with provincial staff if the timelines kind of line up like that, certainly.
Okay. All right. Ian.
Yeah, perhaps just to follow up a little on where Nico was going with this. Perhaps you could comment on why the need to delay a septic maintenance bylaw pending an uncertain outcome with respect to additional funding. Wouldn't it be wise to proceed with that bylaw, which would just then no longer be required should a sewer come along? But I believe the harm is being done now, and the harm will continue to be done, and that there's no real reason to delay a bylaw.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's good feedback, Ian. I think just kind of in the context of what had previously been discussed at the TACPAC table for the addendum, we'd always kind of discussed it as an alternate option, and so I guess that's how it was kind of still being viewed. But you might be right. It could be.
I'm perhaps in the entirety that was the sentiment, right, in my mind. These things are required. And that the fact that people, I forget what the number is, like there's 60% of septic systems in Union Bay that are of unknown type, right? Like that speaks to me that there's a lot of failed systems and a lot of unnecessary pathogens seeping out into the world, right? And even with this project, it's still years in coming in terms of construction. I don't understand why we wouldn't go to homeowners and say, you have to do a better job.
Derry, is the septic bylaw included in the liquid waste management report? It seems to me I saw it on the schedule. So it is anticipated?
So the exact wording of the commitment in the plan, I'm not sure. I think Angie will probably pull it up later, but it's a commitment to explore development of a bylaw.
Okay.
The actual bylaw hasn't been developed.
I thought I had seen that when I went through it. Martin?
Just to put this into very short perspective, 25 years ago, the impetus for extending the sewer to Kai Bay was that the medical officer of health issued a letter saying that all development and population growth in the vicinity of the septic systems that were failing should be frozen, and the householders were forbidden from developing their property, including things like putting in an extra bedroom. So we really did have a motive, whereas maybe the motive isn't quite there yet in the South Sewer.
Thanks for that. Anything else? Anything else you want to say, Derry?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I would say like this is a draft plan that we're looking for feedback on at this point, including kind of the wording of those commitments within the plan. So if there's kind of feedback on or tweaks to that wording that the committee wants to to recommend, then that can be put forward to the steering committee.
Ian, do you want to consider making a motion?
I'd hold off on that. I want to really go to the section of the LGMP document, and so I can look at it and say what you might want to suggest.
We'll come back to that then. Sorry.
Maybe a naive question. Is there any cost benefit analysis? Just, this comment about put the pipe in now and they will come versus having people upgrade their systems? Like, I don't know what it costs to upgrade a system. Say it's $15,000 times all these people versus putting a pipe down there. Is there any usefulness in looking at that as a sort of a cost benefit analysis? That may not make sense.
Yeah, so we did do that work through that stage 1-2 addendum process, looking at kind of the costs and benefits of staying on septic versus community sewer, and that did show a long-term benefit to community sewer based on kind of the project scope and budget at that time.
Thank you, Jim.
I do believe though, Derry, the looking at of that was based on a much larger population, not the existing population. So that was based on the greater population of the development as opposed to the existing population that's there now in terms of those cost benefits.
Yeah, so the budget, the project budget at that time, is that what you mean, Jim? Yeah.
Okay, so maybe we'll come back to this. Again, it's too bad that Chris isn't here. He's got called away. So Derry's going to pitch it for him and provide a summary of consultation and feedback.
Okay, well, this is a busy slide, but I think as we've established, this has been a very lengthy process, and many of you have been here since the beginning. So it's been 8 years, almost to the month, since we started this process back in June 2018. So I think this slide really helps to illustrate just how far we've come from that 2018 kickoff. technical review and engagement in 2018, 2019. A bit of a pause during COVID. But in winter 2020, we had preferred level of treatment approved. Then in spring, fall 21, the preferred conveyance option was approved, which then, as you know, got taken out of the plan and continued on as its own project. Stage 1 and 2 plan was completed in 2022. And then, as we just spoke about, we completed a sewer extension south addendum between 22 and 24. And then also during that time, delivery of the conveyance project and the treatment facility master plan, kind of all culminating in where we're at today with this stage 3 LWMP. So yes, thank you all very much, especially those who have been here since the beginning for your participation in this process. It certainly has been an important component of the process and has really had a positive direct impact on the outcome. Yeah, so this is just a fairly quick overview of the previous consultation during the stage 1 and 2 plan, just really showing kind of the significant amount of engagement that has gone into all of the phases of this planning process. So at that time, 13 TACPAC meetings, as well as some very good public engagement numbers. And within kind of the body of the stage 3 report, you will find a summary of the stage 1 and 2 LWMP consultation, as well as the consultation that was completed on the stage 1 and 2 addendum for the sewer extension south. So for this stage 3 process, we've had a few different engagement touch points with the community, starting with a new online engage page in winter 26 and a open house and tour at the treatment plant back in March, which was fairly well attended. And then more recently, ongoing engagement, again through the Engage page, and then a May 5th open house at the CBRD office, which was unfortunately not very well attended, but is what it is, yeah. Yeah. So for First Nations consultation, I think as we've discussed, the CVRD has an established process for engagement with Comox First Nation, and we've been working through that process with regards to this LWMP. There's also 13 potentially impacted nations with overlapping territory within the plan area. And so for this stage 3 planning process, letters were sent to all of those nations regarding the EIS and to introduce the process in fall of 2025, along with a follow-up letter and summary document of the draft report and EIS, which was sent earlier this month. And then we will also plan to do a 30-day follow-up letter in June for any nations that have not yet responded. So there's also been engagement with our municipal partners. So there's been a referral to municipal councils as part of this stage 3 planning process, with a focus on I&I and source control commitments. We've got support from the town of Comox for both, and support from the city for source control, and final discussion on I&I at the May 27th council meeting. Staff are recommending one minor change, which we'll see when Angie presents. And the recommendation today will include that change and a commitment to re-engage with the TACPAC if any more substantial changes come out of that meeting with council. So there was also a value engineering review completed, which really focused on optimizing design and construction and identifying options to improve fiscal affordability for all of the upgrades that are being contemplated. Key outcomes included deferment of full build out of the UV system, deferment of full build out of the filter systems, modifications to the septage receiving facilities at the wastewater treatment plant, as well as relocation of the grit removal facilities. And I think we reviewed this table in detail at our last meeting, but essentially this is an overview of kind of the cost impacts per connection for borrowing related to those phase 4 upgrades, with scenario 1 being the scenario where there's no grant funding provided, and then scenario 2 if the grant funding that we've applied for is successful. I think that's all for that kind of brief overview, but any questions I can try and answer, and if I can't answer them, I'll write them down for Chris to get back to you guys.
I don't want to put you on the spot there, but where you said full build out of the disinfection system, does that infer there's a partial, like a build out for today's flows as opposed to future flows?
That one I will have to get Chris to respond to the committee on. Sorry, Jim. Thanks.
Just
Ian?
sorry.
Oh, sorry. Kevin and then Ian?
I think Ian beat me. Go. All right. I'm sure this is going to be why are you asking this question? And I don't mean that in a bad way. For the I&I commitments from Comox and Courtney, I understand the value of that is massive and you want to, reduce flows. Do we have any sense of what that could look like in terms of time, costs? Like, is this big? Is this small? Any just general idea?
I don't know. Shelley might be able to help me out with that one a little bit better than I can answer that question.
That's going to be part of the whole process that we're going to be doing once we put the flow monitors in and we can see what's going on, and then we'll do analysis to figure out how much I&I is coming in, what that capital project could look like, what is the cost. So before we do any type of data collecting, we don't know what that impact would look like at this point. So that's the first stage that we're going to do, is collect some of the data, some of the flows in the pipe systems, and then we can monitor it. And I think that's going to happen in 2038. Don't quote me on that time frame, but we'll know by then what that looks like in regards to the I&I.
Oh,
yeah. Yeah.
Ian?
Is now the right time then to propose changes to wording to the report regarding this septic bylaw?
I think actually what we should probably do is go through this next, the review of the stage 3 plan, because we're still on the summary of consultation and feedback. Am I correct about that?
Yeah, so I think Angie's going to present on kind of all of the commitments within the plan, and then after that would be a good time. Thanks, Ian. Yeah.
That's a good segue, though. Maybe we can move to that. Thanks.
Thanks, everyone. I'll just introduce myself while we're pulling up the slides. I'm Angie Smythe. I'm with WSP. I'm a wastewater engineer and planner, and I'm here today filling in for Mike Deslitz, who I think has presented before. May have met you all before, but I think I'm probably the... is that better? Much better. Okay. Yeah, I'm gonna present a summary of the stage 3 liquid waste management plan commitments. And I'll also give a brief overview of the process and the benefits of doing liquid waste management planning. Can I grab the clicker, please? Thank you. All right. Okay, so like I just mentioned, I'll give a quick overview and process reminder of liquid waste management planning, and then a summary of the stage 3 commitments that are brought forward. So what is a liquid waste management plan and what is the process? So it's a 3-stage process and it's conducted according to guidelines that are published by the BC Ministry of Environment. And it's intended to examine the long-term wastewater management needs of the whole community. So in other words, it's a method of providing a comprehensive plan for building, financing, and managing a community's liquid waste infrastructure. So it's completed through a multi-year planning, engineering, and public consultation process to develop long-term community-specific solutions. And public consultation, as we've talked about and seen, is conducted throughout all 3 stages, and the final plan produces a written record of the community's liquid waste management decisions. So at its simplest, the 3-stage process, in stage 1, we're gathering information, we're developing concepts or a long list of options, and then doing some amount of screening to identify what is realistic or a short list. That gets carried forward to stage 2, where we do a more detailed analysis of the options, select a preferred option, and we produce the draft liquid waste management plan for stage 1 and 2. And then at stage 3, involves confirming the final preferred option, developing the costs, the implementation schedules, and the financing needs, ultimately leading to an approved liquid waste management plan. So from a regulatory perspective, the liquid waste management plan is not a requirement, it is voluntary. But the BC Environmental Management Act, it allows local governments to develop an LWMP for approval by the Minister of the Environment, and there are distinct benefits to doing so. So the approved LWMP provides borrowing authority for local governments without the approval of electors to implement the approved liquid waste management plan. Once the final plan is approved by the Minister of the Environment, there is no mechanism to appeal it. So the liquid waste management plan must demonstrate that an adequate process for comprehensive review and consultation with the public is provided. And then the approved liquid waste management plan also provides the necessary authorizations through the issuance of the operational certificates. And the liquid waste management plan complies with the municipal wastewater regulation, and the ministry also considers satisfaction of their interim guidelines for the preparation of liquid waste management plans when they review and approve the plan. Okay. And just a reminder of what's been done through the entire process, focus more on stage 3. At stage 1 and 2, liquid waste management plan and the sewer extension south addendum both underwent public consultation prior to ministry review and comment. And the ministry review and comment informed the scope of the stage 3 liquid waste management plan, kind of in this middle row here, column here. And that was to add the source control and I&I planning components, to complete the site master planning process, which included the outfall planning component, and then the sewer extension south planning component that Derry has already talked about a little bit today. And then at stage 3, consultation and engagement have continued throughout, which has informed the draft liquid waste management plan commitments and the implementation schedule that we're going to review here in a couple of slides. Okay, so I'm going to review the summary of the stage 3 commitments and their schedule and cost estimates. So the commitments are grouped by components. There's 9 in total. We're going to go through them one by one. I've already touched on this a little bit, but wastewater treatment, outfall planning, and resource recovery are all informed by the site master planning process. The sewer extension south component was already discussed today. And source control, I&I, and climate change mitigation and adaptation are all in response to ministry comments on the stage 1 and 2 liquid waste management plan. And then environmental monitoring and liquid waste management plan monitoring are required by the LWMP guidelines. So wastewater treatment commitments. The wastewater treatment options were presented in the stage 1 and 2 LWMP, and further analysis was completed as part of site master planning. And site master planning was really intended to guide the long-term planning and phase delivery of the upgrades at the treatment plant. So the first wastewater treatment commitment is to implement what we're calling phase 4 foundational upgrades in the 2030 timeframe, and that's recommended in the site master plan. So foundational upgrades, those are needed to implement the wet weather treatment strategy, and they include new headworks, tertiary filtration, and UV disinfection, along with other process modifications and expansions, and then investments in the outfall and resource recovery, excuse me. And the cost estimate and the timeline were also presented in the site master plan. The second wastewater treatment commitment, periodically validating population and flow projections, and that's to confirm the timing for future capital projects and adjust the phasing of future upgrades in accordance with projections as needed. So outfall planning, the outfall was constructed in the 1980s, and in the ministry's review of the stage 1 and 2 LWMP, they noted that further studies were required to determine the timeline for outfall replacement. In 2024 and 2025, capacity and condition assessments were completed, and the outcomes have informed the development of the commitments presented here. So this first commitment, it's also captured in the foundational upgrades that I just mentioned, but it involves modifying the effluent pumping system to increase the capacity of the outfall and extend the service life for another 10 years. And then further studies are presented in commitments 2 and 3, which would be completed before the next liquid waste management plan update. So to complete an additional outfall condition assessment and conduct a feasibility study and review options for replacing the outfall. Okay. Resource recovery. So the ministry commented in their review of the stage 1 and 2 liquid waste management plan that the stage 3 liquid waste management plan should include a cost benefit analysis of resource recovery options as part of site master planning. So the site master plan considered reclaimed water, heat recovery, and biosolids management options, ultimately recommending on-site reuse of reclaimed water and continuing to produce Class A compost. The reclaimed water system is included as part of phase 4 foundational upgrades, so wastewater treatment commitment number 1. And then the liquid waste management plan also commits to conducting a capacity assessment of the existing composting facility, and in the future, considering other resource recovery opportunities as conditions change. So the sewer extension south, we've already talked about these, so I wasn't going to dwell on them, but these commitments are included in the stage 3 liquid waste management plan, and we do have a schedule associated with exploring the development of a bylaw for septic system maintenance, and I will leave it at that. Source control. So as I mentioned, the ministry's review of the stage 1 and 2 LWMP noted that source control planning should be included in the commitments for the stage 3 liquid waste management plan. So the commitments presented here have been reviewed through the Sewer Advisory Committee and Sewer Commission. The town of Comox and city of Courtenay both have sanitary sewer bylaws that cover many source control components or that are generally used to regulate the way connections are made. And the first commitment here is to strengthen and harmonize the sanitary sewer bylaws for the town of Comox and city of Courtenay on the 2030 timeframe. And the second commitment is around developing and executing a regional educational campaign that focuses on source control. Okay, inflow and infiltration. So I have a couple of slides, I think 3 slides on I&I, and that includes all non-sanitary flows entering a sewer system. And the municipal wastewater regulation requires local governments to make commitments to reduce I&I to below 2 times the average dry weather flow. So the CVRD is consulted with the town of Comox and the city of Courtenay through the Sewer Advisory Committee and Sewer Commission to develop the commitments to reducing I&I that are presented here. Derry already talked about this a little bit, but I think they are still draft. The first commitment, this is also captured in the foundational upgrades presented in the site master plan, basically implementing the wet weather treatment strategy to achieve the selected level of treatment at the plant. The second commitment would be a joint responsibility of the CVRD and participants in the Comox Valley Sewer Service, and involves developing a staged I&I reduction plan to work towards meeting the municipal wastewater regulation requirements in the future. So this third I&I commitment has multiple components. The first, the CVRD will develop a standardized I&I reporting template. Comox Valley Sewer Service participants would conduct additional flow monitoring in the collection systems at the subcatchment level. The CVRD will conduct additional flow monitoring at jurisdictional boundaries. And then the CVRD and Comox Valley Sewer Service participants will all develop year-by-year inspection plans for systematic inspection of infrastructure and identify and conduct the cost-benefit analyses of I&I reduction options to develop system remediation plans. Okay. So commitment number 4, I understand that this is proposed to be removed. Commitment 5 involves reviewing and updating bylaws related to sewer system connections and engineering development standards, and that would be done by both the CVRD and Comox Valley Sewer Service participants. And then commitment number 6, the CVRD will investigate funding mechanisms to help facilitate I&I reduction, program development, and future capital works. Okay. Climate change mitigation and adaptation. In the ministry review of the stage 1 and 2 liquid waste management plan, they commented that the stage 3 plan should link commitments to broader CVRD work being done towards climate mitigation and adaptation, such as through the climate action strategy or the sustainability strategy. And the stage 3 liquid waste management plan makes 3 commitments to track and report on greenhouse gas emissions annually, to develop a decarbonization strategy, and to track annual rainfall frequency and intensity of extreme rain events to facilitate future planning. And then last slide on commitments. I've grouped the last 2 categories together: environmental monitoring and liquid waste management plan monitoring and update. Both are required in the guidelines for liquid waste management plans. Related to environmental monitoring, Peter touched on this in his presentation earlier as well, but the liquid waste management plan commits to completing an annual receiving environment monitoring program for treatment plant discharge. And then liquid waste management plan monitoring and updates. The liquid waste management plan commits to establishing a plan monitoring committee, to reviewing plan progress and updating as required, and providing regular status updates on commitments, and then conducting the first review of the liquid waste management plan within 10 years or around the 2035 timeframe. So those are the commitments. And then the last thing that I wanted to share is just a timeline over the next 10 years before the first plan review of the proposed commitments. So we see kind of in the immediate time frame, looking at a composting capacity assessment, a decarbonization strategy, and establishing the plan monitoring committee. The phase 4 foundational upgrades at the Comox Valley Water Pollution Control Center would proceed very quickly. And then around the 2030 timeframe, starting to look at the source control commitments. And then early in the 2030s, depending on whether sewer servicing for the sewer extension south will proceed, there's the potential bylaw for septic system maintenance. And then as we come up towards the first plan review around 2035, looking at conducting an outfall condition assessment, a feasibility study for outfall replacement, additional resource recovery, opportunity investigations, and then developing infrastructure inspection plans for I&I reduction. So that's what I had to share, and I'll do my best to answer any questions.
Questions? Recommendations? Ultimately, I'll just say this, ultimately, at the end of this, you can see a request for decision and a recommendation. That's where we're hoping to get to today, is a resolution recommending this to the Sewage Commission for adoption. And with this one deletion, and I just wonder maybe if you could just offer some explanation for that. Just, I'm sure this is on people's minds.
Yeah, I think that that came out of the referral to municipal councils as a potential change, but I'm not sure if it's confirmed yet or not. I think there's still that council meeting happening tomorrow.
Okay. Questions of Jerry or Angie? Ian?
So I would like to propose that we modify the last section on page 45 of the report, which is entitled Septic Regulatory Bylaw. And I'll just read it for everybody. Some local governments have produced their own bylaws to support implementation of the sewerage system regulation, which is the provincial government's regulations around septic systems. The Capital Regional District implemented bylaw 3479 in 2008, requiring system maintenance and record keeping according to a specific schedule and providing enforcement powers to bylaw officers. There is currently no formalized CVRD maintenance bylaw for septic systems. The CVRD commits to exploring the development of a bylaw for septic system maintenance within those parts of electoral area A included in the plan area boundaries to be put in place if sewer servicing will not proceed as planned. So I would propose, and perhaps I'll put out the things that are going in my mind and then come back to proposal, right? The first one is the if sewer servicing will not proceed as planned. And then based on what was just presented, the date of 2032 was shocking to this side of the table based on the commentary I heard. So to put in place a bit more urgency around that. And then the second thing that's going on in my mind is the restriction of the area to just that considered by the Sewer Extension South project, whereby there's septic systems everywhere in the CVRD, and I'm uncertain why we wouldn't sort of say all septic systems have the potential to cause problems, recognizing that property size and proximity to water and all those sorts of things are probably factors to consider as well. So I guess as a starting point, I would look at something, and I'll try to create something on the flow here, right? Is that the CVRD commits to the development, not exploring, but the development of a bylaw for septic system maintenance for all properties within the CVRD by 2027. So that would be just I'll throw it out there as a proposed amendment for discussion, and then we can tune it and maybe vote on something.
Derry?
Yeah, if I may, and I just wanted to respond to the kind of area proposed for that maintenance bylaw. So right now we're looking at the liquid waste management plan, which essentially includes kind of commitments for those areas within the plan boundary. The plan boundary at this time includes kind of those areas currently serviced by the Comox Valley Sewerage Service, as well as those proposed to be serviced in the future, which is those Area A properties. So we couldn't make commitments through this plan for areas that are kind of outside of those plan area boundaries. It is something that, could be explored through a separate process and has been explored, but not something we can make commitments for through this plan.
Okay, so I do understand that. And I guess how would we then extend that commitment outside of this forum to be something bigger? Because it seems to me in some ways to be unfair to the residents of Area A that they would be subject to this, whereas people that might be living on Bates Beach or on the Trent River or on the Puntledge River or any other body of water that has the same impact on the environment that they wouldn't be subject to that same thing. So I don't know how we handle that part, but I think it's important that we don't just focus on Area A residents or even a subset of Area A residents, have them require more stringent guidelines.
Yeah, I mean, a CVRD-wide bylaw has been considered by the EASC in the past, and at this time we're moving forward with kind of septic rebates as an alternate option, but not to say it couldn't be considered again in the future.
Okay, so restricting this to the plan boundaries, which I guess might consider a few properties outside of Area A. There might be some consideration there, or is it? Yeah, perhaps not. Doesn't matter. That actually doesn't matter. But I would propose that this is altered to eliminate the words if sewer servicing will not proceed as planned to be put in place by 2027. That would be proposal. I guess that's the only proposal I'm really putting forward now.
Other comments on Ian's proposal, Kevin?
Just being a former bureaucrat, I believe you said develop, or I always like the words develop and implement. It gives some certainty to it, because I can develop anything, but I don't have to implement it. And the other possible suggestion is, if that is going to be the recommendation, could it be study the effectiveness of this bylaw within Area A to consider future application outside of it, just to tie some kind of future work with it, but respecting the fact that I understand this has to be within Area A. Could we do that kind of wording? It just sort of builds on rather than just full stop. Also consider if it's effective where it might be applied outside of this process. If that works, Ian, just trying to build on your thoughts with making it feasible.
And I don't think I'm the one to answer your last question. It'd be more of a dairy or somebody else that could say, can you tag that kind of comment into this WNP?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, we can't make that commitment. I don't see why commentary probably wouldn't be acceptable, but yeah.
Commentary saying this might be beyond, but it's outside of the scope.
Could that be a recommendation to the Sewage Commission?
The change in wording for the commitment?
Not specifically within the waste management plan process, but a recommendation to the Sewage Commission that they consider it.
Yeah, I think we can include that commentary within the changes being proposed to the commitment. Is that what you mean?
So if I were to propose wording based on everything I've heard here, and this is the last sentence on page 45 of the report, is that the CVRD commits to the development and implementation of a bylaw for septic system maintenance within those parts of electoral Area A included in the plan area boundaries to be put in place no later than 2027. I'm stopping there because I believe we need a second recommendation around
that's right. Sector. Thank you, Lauren. Go ahead.
So
did you have something else you wanted to say?
What I'm saying is Kevin's last comment about including a recommendation for using it as a testing ground, maybe as a second recommendation that we make.
So let's deal with this resolution first. Any discussion on the resolution?
I'd just like to say I support Ian's resolution on that, but I do think that in the development of a bylaw that it should be looked at as a way, there's some method in there of rebating people that are in that Area A a portion of the cost for septic pump out. And I've actually just did a very quick calculation, and I'm going back to the $30 million that I believe the CVRD has sitting somewhere. And based on that, if it was even an annual pump out for the 1,000 existing residents, would be about $300 which is like 1% of the 33 million that's sitting in the bank. If it was every 2 years, it would be 0.5%. So surely we're earning some interest on that money that's sitting in the bank, and it wouldn't be a stretch to assist people in the cost of pump outs now, potentially on the tipping fee is where I would be going, is to, waive the tipping fee or something of that nature for the people in those areas that have been waiting so long to get sewer, and it's been unable to be delivered, yet we have this huge amount of grant funds sitting there waiting to deliver that project.
Thanks, Jim. Sheila? Sorry.
I was just going to ask if you could actually repeat the whole motion before we vote on it.
And based on Jim's commentary, I'd written something else down that I didn't include, but maybe we might want to consider extending my motion. So I'll read it again and add a few words to the end. So the CBRD commits to the development and implementation of a bylaw for septic system maintenance within those parts of electoral area A included in the plan area boundaries to be put in place no later than 2027, with consideration for financial impacts to property owners. The reason for that I used those particular words were, we may have this bylaw in place and then have a sewer plan, right? So that we might say, okay, you must do this maintenance on your system, but your system actually should be replaced, but we're not going to require you to do that because there will be a sewer here in 2 years. So I just wanted to have some kind of flexibility in that, so that you wouldn't necessarily take the nuclear option of causing somebody to spend $30,000 for 1 year.
Mary, did I see your hand go up? No?
No, I'm developing an amendment for the treatment.
So that's a reading of a proposed, or a motion for a proposed amendment. Probably needs to be second, right?
Okay.
So I changed it.
How about if we hear some comments before we go to an amendment of your motion?
So I just did, that was the motion I just made. It was different than the one I made.
Right. So you're moving to amend your motion. Right. Okay. Do we have a seconder? Thank you. Norm? And discussion. Sheila, you had your, no. Discussion on the amendment to the motion? All those in favor of the amendment? Opposed? Carried? Okay, so we're back to the motion as amended. So with the additional final clause. Any discussion on the motion as amended? Kevin?
Just to build on Jim's comment there, is it worth putting some verbiage around that as a to your economic impact statement? As, consider annual pumping out at some reduced fee. I believe, if I might be right, that even annual pumping could help reduce the impacts of these systems and to determine which ones may need to further work as a stepwise procedure. I don't know if that's way too detailed for this or not.
Yeah, my thoughts on that is that, you've made a broad recommendation. Let's see where that gets to. And because presumably if you went through this process of developing a bylaw, all of those things are going to be part of that consideration, I would say. Any other discussion on the motion? Call a question. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. And then, Ian, did you want to make a second motion?
I think this was more on Kevin's points, and maybe I'll defer to him with respect to using this as a test ground for, or was it you, Jim? I forget who had that point. It was Kevin, yeah.
So I see this as a recommendation to the Sewage Commission.
Right, as opposed to within the
part of the waste management plan. So when the recommendation to support advancing this to the commission goes, then we would have a second separate motion about broadening the application of the bylaw. Does that make sense to you, Derry?
Yeah, I think that that process makes sense. Probably directed to our electoral area services committee as well for that one.
So would it be, I mean, I'm assuming that this TACPAC committee essentially reports to the sewage commission, right? So, so it would be a recommendation to the sewage commission with consideration and referral to the electoral services committee. Okay, that makes sense. So, in the motion, or Kevin, the resolution would be a recommendation to the sewage committee with consideration by the electoral services committee to consider the potential of expansion of a septic maintenance bylaw to all electoral or all areas of the region of the CVRD, something like that. Is that? I don't want to put words in your mouth, but. Michael, are you good with that?
Get it on the video.
You get it on the video. Okay.
Recommendation.
So moved by Ian and seconded by Kevin. Does that make sense? Okay. And Lorraine, did you have your hand? No? Okay. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Okay. Sorry, Mary?
Yeah, I'm wondering if I can suggest another recommendation. Alongside seeking additional grant funding and partnerships, that the CVRD explore alternate models of septage treatment or maintenance, including feasibility of financing assistance to private homeowners to upgrade systems.
So are you moving that
Moving.
as a motion?
Yeah.
Is there a seconder? Yeah, Lorraine? Discussion on that motion? Would you mind just reading that
Sure.
one more time?
Alongside seeking additional grant funding and partnerships, that the CVRD explore alternate models of septage treatment or maintenance, including feasibility of financing assistance to private homeowners to upgrade systems.
Okay, discussion on the motion.
Great idea.
Derek?
Yeah, I guess maybe just for clarity, Mary, is the motion to have that included as a commitment within the LWMP, or is it a separate kind of
No, that's
motion to the?
commitment.
Okay.
Because I feel as if I can speak to my motion, I feel as if South's area has been waiting for a sewage system, and that dissuades homeowners from investing in their private septage systems. And if financing is explored, that might actually be an interesting way to attack this. But I think the longer we leave it, the more failing septic systems you're going to have.
I have a relevant personal story to share with you on this. Again, I'm going back 25 years ago, and the situation was exactly just what Mary was talking about at the time. We thought that in 2 or 3 or 4 years' time, we were going to get the big pipe in. And many of us, I actually had to have a porta potty in my backyard because I couldn't flush my toilet. Okay. And I had that for 6 months. I was waiting. And the environmental officer, the enforcement there was an enforcement system.
Probably Island Health.
I must be Island, yeah. They wouldn't let me do a temporary repair on my septic system. I had to spend 25 grand, which I didn't have, to put in a sophisticated dosing pumping system. And it was a real bind. And so the reason I'm raising this is because I have a lot of sympathy with the folks that are in that situation. And there's more than one solution. You could actually make it possible to have less than the gold-plated sewer septic system. You could have, old technology with the old, the old pipes with the holes in, without the pumping systems, without the dosing, without the electronics, which I was required to put in. So yeah, there's some transitional arrangement would be not, and it may not just be money, it may be actually changing the standards of
required.
That might be harder because it's provincial, I believe. But the other thing I think that you might be able to sell this area on is it means their property values will go up if they have updated septic systems. I think it would be very hard to sell down there right now.
Maureen?
Come back to me.
Okay.
One quick thing. First off, I completely support what Mary's trying to do, but what I'm wondering is if whether we've covered that in our first amendment to the document, and whereas we said with consideration for financial impacts to property owners, does that not cover that specific topic of financing and things, or are we again constraining the people that will write this bylaw?
I just feel as if the CVRD is, the vision has been limited to a South Sewer project. And I think that we need to open up the vision so that there are alternate models that might be explored. Yeah.
Lauren?
I also think that we have to look at the timeline. We've been talking about South Sewer for over 20 years now. And the original system that went in 1982, that was a long project as well in development. So I think we can't wait and then find out that 10 years from now, there isn't going to be a South Sewer. We need to do something now. So I think this broadens the possibilities.
Any other discussion?
Yeah, for years I've always been the big pipe guy, but there are other solutions besides the big pipe solution, providing the size of the community will permit it. So the big pipe solution is probably the right solution for a much larger community in that area. And it depends what the desire is, I guess, to service that or not. So there's that to think about.
Lauren?
And it also depends on if there is a big pipe where it stops. So having options for the areas that don't get included in the next 10, 20, 30 years is something I think we need to work at now.
Seeing no other hands up, call the question on Mary's motion. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. I note that we're running a bit late. Can I assume we're good to carry on for a little bit longer? Because at the end, if there are no further motions, we need to have a motion to advance the liquid waste management plan draft to the Sewage Commission. So are you okay for carrying on? Sorry? Oh, I'm sorry. Who do we know who it is? Oh, it's Chair Cole Hamilton. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks so much, Allison. I was going to ask if staff could take a break at the end of this meeting to help encourage everyone here to share the alert we have right now based upon an unfortunate sewage leak and a do not flush request for the entire valley. It's occurred while this meeting has happened, and so I just want to make sure that staff maybe had a moment to be able to share that and the urgency of it at the end of the meeting, given what we're all talking about right now.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. What timing? Oh,
well, it's great to have everyone gathered and listening at the same time. I just sent it to Tracy and a few other people, but yes.
Okay.
Y'all can come to my place. I'm on septic.
Thank you. I'm glad I'm driving south. Thank you for that, Mr. Chair. So if we'll get to that. On the agenda, there's the request for decision, which is our, sorry. Oh, oh gosh, oh dear. So what we were anticipating today was the kind of resolutions that we've just been discussing, but also a recommendation to the Sewage Commission that the Commission approve the Stage 3 Liquid Waste Management Report with following change, and that's the change that the IL-4 and the recommendations that you have also made. Jerry, is there any comment you want to make about that? Sorry, your light's on, so
Yeah, oh no.
No, okay. So that's it's the overarching recommendation to the Sewage Commission that this move forward with your accompanying recommendations that we've just been discussing. Kevin, you're looking mystified. Yeah, so the recommendation would be that the TACPAC recommends to the Sewage Commission that the Commission approve the Stage 3 liquid waste management project with the changes that we have discussed today.
So moved.
Yep. Kevin moves the motion. Sorry, Mary. Seconded. Seconded. Discussion on that overarching motion. This is the culmination of all of your work. I don't want you to let this seem unimportant in any way. Martin.
So one thing that I just wanted to raise was, something horrible happened in Metro Vancouver and the North Shore. You've probably seen it on the news. It will have been maybe 15 years ago, they would have been at the same stage as we are now, looking at upgrading their sewage treatment plant. And there must have been a meeting like this where they will have approved or supported an expenditure of $700 million at that time to upgrade their sewage treatment plant. Then what happened? I don't know what happened, and I'm wondering if the professionals around the table have been to any meetings or professional development sessions where they've learned how the catastrophe happened in North Vancouver, because what happened was suddenly the cost ballooned by a factor of 5 times. It was Acciona was the contractor that was the next stage that will be, presume this is what's going to happen with us. We're going to have a next stage where there'll be a contractor, right? And so, I mean, I don't know whether there are any parallels between where we are now and where they were at then, but I hate to think that something like this would happen to us. So is there anything to be learned from what happened in North Van? Do we know anything about what happened in North Van?
I think that I'd like to just suggest that the TACPAC did a great job in Metro, but something happened after the TACPAC did their work. I think it's very complicated. I don't know if you guys want to, yeah. I'm sure that it's just rife with litigation at the moment.
I know.
So maybe
no lessons that we can pick from that, but I don't know.
I
don't know whether Angie has any insights. Yeah. The cost ballooned 5 times in 8 years or something. Yeah.
On the motion that's on the table, any other discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. That really is the conclusion of the. I guess. I guess we're not going to get. We did have a couple of items that we hoped that Chris was going to be able to respond to, and we're not going to be able to do that, right? And you'll want to respond to the chair's request for an update. Okay.
Yeah. So I just wanted to provide these couple of slides on next steps, just so that everybody's aware of kind of the process from here. So so in June, the Sewage Commission will review the plan along with this committee's feedback and motions, and hopefully approval of the Stage 3 LWMP will take place at that time. And then this summer, we will conclude First Nations review of the plan, and the plan will be submitted to the ministry pending no material comments come back from First Nations. And then operational certificate application will also be submitted to the province, as well as continued design of the phase 4 foundational upgrades over the summer. Yeah, and then from there, spring, summer 27 would be review and potential approval of the plan by the province. And beyond that, ongoing would be liquid waste management plan monitoring and updates. And I think we had mentioned that a plan monitoring committee will be established and will meet annually to review and discuss progress on the plan. And then this one we've already accomplished, yeah.
I'm glad to see that it seemed to me that I was under the impression that the ministerial review was going to take 2 years, but it's only 1 year. So that's not so bad in the greater scheme of things.
Yeah, I think those are estimates certainly, and it'll be.
Any questions about next steps, Kevin?
Sort of next steps. Is there any way we'll hear back about this recommendation to the sewage commission about, the bylaw and such? Just because, if this is the last meeting, I'd just love to be in the loop somehow.
Yeah.
That's all.
Yeah, I'd say
Derek?
certainly we can follow up with the committee on kind of the conclusion and the recommendations coming out of the committee, as well as the final plan that goes forward to the
Yeah,
province.
it'd be great after the sewage commission meeting to have a little update. That would be great. Yeah.
I guess the one thing that just came to mind is we actually created a commitment today, right? There was a commitments table in the document, wasn't there? So I assume that motion we did that updated a paragraph in the report also created a commitment, did it?
Harry?
Yeah, so it would be a recommendation to kind of a corresponding update to the commitment relevant to that paragraph. Is that what you mean?
Yeah. You're going to give us an update on that?
Yeah, so just following up on the chair's comment there, we have had an operational issue today that has resulted in a no flush notice going out to the committee, to the community. So at this time, asking people to not flush their toilets, to not use water that drains into the sewage system, no showers or baths or use of dishwashers or washing machines, and harvesting shellfish or marine resources from the affected area. We don't have much more to provide at this time, but a further update is expected to be provided at 2 p.m. today. So, and I guess I don't have any more information. Sorry, Jim, but yeah, hopefully more information will come later today for the community. I don't know. Chair Cole Hamilton might have more information than I do.
Yeah, I don't believe I have more information than you, but one suggestion might be that there are now easily shareable don't flush posts on social media pushed out by the CVRD. You can find them on Facebook and other places. I found the link or there's an email which I found and shared with the Chamber of Commerce and the Downtown BIA. I might ask colleagues who have connections at other BIAs or other networks of folks who just to try and fan out this information as quickly as we possibly can. Just not running your dishwasher, not showering, not flushing, those are all going to make a big difference, but we need as many people as possible to be aware of that as quickly as possible. So if you can all take a minute before you leave the meeting to find that post and just share it on social media, that would be just a really valuable use of your time. Yeah, thanks.
I just looked on, and Czech News has this is an AI overview, but it says a severe emergency incident involving a wastewater leak at the Comox pump station has resulted in an urgent do not flush order. That's all it says.
Down as a black bin.
Yeah, as far as I know, that is accurate, but staff can correct if there's anything inaccurate in that statement, but that sounds correct to me.
Oh, gosh.
But that's what we're dealing with. That's why this really matters, and that's why sending this out. So I'm just looking at my screen. I'm seeing Maureen there. If you could send that to the Comox BIA, we can make sure everyone is got it, and ask everyone you share it with to share it. Like, and you tell two friends, and they tell two friends. Like, it'll be just like the shampoo commercial. But anyway, like, this takes community, and it's kind of remarkable that we all happen to be together at this moment, and hopefully can fan this out really quickly.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. And I think it's just highlights just what a critical public service this is, and just you know how great it is that there's been this committee of dedicated people committed to looking after this component of this system. So
I found one other thing that apparently came from Comox Valley School Board. A component of the temporary bypass piping network failed during major upgrades at the pump station. Evacuation areas immediately filled with wastewater and overflowed into the ocean, forcing the district to shut down normal conveyance. So it sounds pretty major.
Yikes.
Talking about Goose Spit Comox Marina here.
Okay.
Literally.
Geez. Before we conclude the meeting, I just wanted to provide an opportunity for members of the committee to offer any reflections on the time that they've spent on the committee, or any thoughts that you might have, and then we'll adjourn. And I wasn't expecting lunch, but is there lunch today? There is a lunch today. Yeah, eat quickly and then drive out of the sewage area. Lorraine?
Well, first of all, I would like to thank you, Allison. You have done a stellar job in chairing this and steering this and keeping us on track and keeping it civilized is a very good way of putting it. And you've been masterful. So thank you very much. I'm really glad you were here.
It's been absolutely been my pleasure. Absolutely. Any other thoughts or reflections? And thank you all. And I do hope our paths will cross again, and be watching this project with great interest. Oh,
Yeah.
dear.
Well, I just wanted to say the same. Thank you all. Sincerely, this is a massive commitment. We understand that, and we really, really appreciate all of your time and thoughtful advice throughout this process.
With that, actually, maybe I'll ask Mr. Chair, Cole Hamilton, if there's anything that you would like to see the committee before we wrap up our work.
Wow. Other than please share the news, I just want to say what a huge commitment this is by everyone. It's dry, but certainly, Allison, you've brought life to it and made our meetings more enjoyable than they might otherwise be. But it's a big commitment to the community, and what we're seeing happening today is just reminding us of how, as you said, of how critical this is and how much it matters to our land and our waters and to our communities. So just everyone, this is a huge contribution to just the well-being of the valley, and I just thank everyone for the enormous amount of time they've selflessly committed to the process.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. And I was remiss in my thanks too. I really want to commend the staff at the CVRD. I've worked with a lot of local governments around BC, but I just really think the engineering staff at the CVRD, and of course all the staff, including Michael, dedicated, and Jake and James, just how great it is to work with such devoted people, and with the consulting engineers as well. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Allison. Can I begin a virtual round of applause out here? I hope it'll continue in the room for everyone who's put time into this. But thank you, everyone. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks so much. And I gather lunch is served. Thank you. All right, do we need a motion to adjourn? A motion to adjourn. So moved from Jim, seconded by Ian. All in favor? Carried. Thanks so much.